to another episode of our Facebook Live here with Dr. Noah Liu and myself. Today, we have an exciting topic for you guys: how to purchase a dental office real estate and how to structure the deal. We are going to lean in big time from Dr. Noah Liu's expertise on this because he's done several of these deals, and we're going to talk about that in a way that this is going to benefit a lot of you. A lot of you have been doing this wrong, and we are going to talk to you today and give you some tips on how to structure this. My name is Tom Babi Verghese. I'm a friend and partner of Dr. Noah Liu. I've started with no knowledge in real estate about 4.5 years ago, and now I'm an owner of over 1,000 units, different kinds of real estate, industrial, storage, apartments, things like that. And I'm
Mhm.
excited that you've joined us today. Dr. Noah Liu, kick it off.
All right, my man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. So, like Tom said, he's a buddy and a partner of ours. We've done a few deals, and together we've been like into multifamily syndications, industrial, and storage. Now, with that being said, today is something different. Today is something that most of our colleagues can benefit from something that I've done in the past, and some things, like I've learned from my mistakes. And I'm going to be sharing exactly for some of you guys who are looking into opening up a dental practice or looking into buying a dental practice with real estate. Now, keep one thing in mind. Most of you guys who actually are owning those practices are doing it right, and some of you are not doing it right. So I want to make sure like I kind of lay this out. The practice is on its own bowl, and the
So
real
let's
estate is
let's
on its
let's
own
let,
bowl.
let's start with this, Dr. Noah Liu. Like, is it advisable for people to own the building that their practice is in? First of all,
Nothing wrong with it.
yeah, you would
Nothing wrong
advise
with it.
to own it, right? If
Oh
it's a
yeah. Oh
retail
yeah.
center, you should own it actually,
You should
because
own it.
you're going to be the tenant, and that's guaranteed income already coming in. So you
Mm-hmm.
know that that tenant is going to pay. So that's why you got to own it. I mean, if it's a huge plaza or something, it's a different story. But if it's like a practice that's got like a couple of offices, dentist, it could be a chiropractor, lawyer, things like that.
Sure.
Totally, we advise that you own it. Now, go ahead. How to structure this, right? A lot of people, how are they doing? How are some of them doing it wrong today? Let's talk about that, and then let's go into how you should be doing it.
Most of the people who start off with real estate and who's just coming off freshly from an associate position where they've been working for a dental group or a dental practice. I mean, one of those biggest mistakes that everybody make is they look at a place, they like the place, they'll go ahead and try to acquire that place. Now, when I say place, I mean dental practice. And most of these guys who are actually selling the practices, they are actually selling it with the real estate component as well. We will always find
So
in a
it's a
classified.
combined deal. So when they
Right.
say this practice is worth this much, that's that's
No,
for
no, no.
real
They,
estate.
they'll keep it separate.
Hmm.
They'll keep it separate.
Oh,
There'll
they'll
be like
keep it separate.
practice.
They'll say
Yeah.
the real estate is this much and the practice is this much.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And they'll be like real estate is also possibly for sale. That's how they're going to
Mhm.
word it. Or
Yeah.
they're going to be like real estate as a separate transaction, which is fine. What we need to do is we need to do our due diligence. We need to do everything that we do normally to buy a practice. We want to make sure like, all the patients, database, kind of payer mix, patient count, what kind of patient pool. And then, of course, if the doctor is willing to stay or not, how for how long, and the staff and all that good stuff that we do normally, right? So that is one aspect of due diligence. Now, the other aspect of due diligence would be our real estate. Our real estate component, we need to find out, are there any other providers on that piece of land, or are you the single door? So whether if it's multiple providers or multiple offices, or if it's just a single door, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that the real estate is separate from the practice, because here's the deal. We look
So
at
so you
something.
just said something. Real estate is separate from the practice, meaning it has to be two separate transactions. Is that what you're trying to
Two
say?
separate transactions, two separate entities, two separate closings, two separate everything, right? It
Two
should
separate
be
loans.
so. I put it this way: it should be so separate that the real estate component does not know what the practice is doing, and the practice does not know what the real estate is doing.
That's awesome. Wow, that's great.
That's rule number one. And this is what happens. I'll give a typical scenario. The practice is for sale, real estate is for sale, and the selling doctor will be like, hey, why don't you buy the real estate as well? And then the broker is going to be like trying to get the commission up. They're going to be like, hey, you know what, let's buy this and buy the practice. So now you got those two together. You take that package, you go to the bank. The bank goes like, oh wow, you're buying the real estate, okay, I can lend you on that as well. So what they'll do is they will take the practice and the real estate, they'll collateralize it and make it as one. And now you got a single loan that they're going to hold on to both those entities, or they'll mix it into one entity. And now it doesn't matter whatever you do. Once when the loan document has been signed, everything is under collateral and everything's guaranteeing everything. You're pretty much done.
Yeah,
So,
banks. See, the thing is, one thing that you just said is that banks are out there not to benefit you. They're looking to pull as
oh,
much money out
100%.
of your wallet as possible. So you got to be careful about this. They will always structure it in a way that benefits them. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. So some of the questions then get asked is, okay, what do I do? All right, so here's what you do. You have two transactions. We got two LOIs that's going to go out. So we spoke about LOI last week, and now this is something where you need to start figuring out, okay, LOI goes out to the seller for the real estate and LOI goes out for the practice. A good attorney will be able to draft two separate LOIs without problems. Once when that goes out, we want to ensure that we've already secured the lenders to understand that we are buying a practice. And once when we buy the practice, we understand that how much are we willing to pay for that practice. Now, usually on a single practice, it's about 70% of collections. That is usually the purchase price. Now, if it's on a really, really good location, the patient quality is really good, there's a good payer mix, good population mix, then it might go up to 80, 85%. But again, every market is different. Whatever that price is, lock it in with the lender. The lender is going to go ahead and finance that portion. Now, keep in mind, the lender is going to ask, what about the real estate? Are you going to be buying the real estate? The answer you should be no.
Mm.
Okay, the answer should be no. Then the lender is
Oh,
going to ask for
so
a lease.
you're just telling them flat out, no, I'm not buying the real estate, and that is true because you're thinking about buying it at that point anyway, right?
Anyways, you're not thinking of buying at that point anyways. And I'm going to tell the seller. So a lot of people ask is, okay, so, but I do want the real estate. I understand you want the real estate really, really bad. This is what we're going to do with the seller. We're going to strike a deal. You're going to make sure it's all relative now, okay? We're going to make sure that maybe you want to pay a little bit over on the practice side or a little bit over on the real estate side. Do it rent to buy kind of deal with the seller, right? So have a lease because the banks are going to require a fully executed lease. So we're going to have a lease, and the lease is going to state that you are renting from the seller. So with that being said, you take the lease, you get your practice, you get it closed, but then you also want to ensure that that lease has something where it says that the buyer is going to buy the real estate in about, let's say, 2 years or maybe 12 months from after the practice closes. Now, this is something which you can negotiate. Okay, does the entire lease payment go towards the buy side, or does it go towards, like half of it goes towards the buy side? What I would recommend is have an agreement made with a separate lender, put $100,000 down, for example, and then secure the property through another lender. Have a different entity, make up a lease, get that lease in place, secure it with the first lender, and call it a day.
So basically, two LLCs, one owns the
Perfect.
practice and one owns the real estate, and you're saying use a different lender for the practice and a different lender for the real estate that owns the practice, basically.
100%. Even though the lender is going to tell you, oh, you can put it under a different LLC, do not believe them because that's not going to happen. The underwriter will require you to collateralize that practice or the real estate, and or vice versa.
Mhm.
So we want to find two different lenders. Step number one, right? Number two is the reason. Why is the reason that we do this? The reason we do this is because in the future, let's say you want to get rid of the practice, you still own the real estate, or you want to get rid of the real estate, you still own the practice, or vice versa. But the best case scenario, the reason we do this is so that we can refi the real estate. And when we say refi, Tom, I want to let you chime in on this one. You're the expert on this, man. When we talk about refi, we are talking about like we have a lease that's in place, and we're going to have the escalations at a higher rate. So let's say if the previous seller was paying $3,000 rent on his real estate, we want to come in, do some modifications, and jack it up to maybe 7 or 8 grand a month, and then have maybe 4% escalations every year. Now, what that does is it just increases the valuation of the real estate. So, Tom, I want you to dive in a little bit. Like, how does the valuation goes up, and what are we doing over here? Like, once when we come in and jack up the rent.
Right, right. So this is the game that you guys need to be familiar with, guys. At the end of the day, it's not just about owning the assets and getting the cash flow. There is a game called as refinance game, where a lot of people are not taking advantage of this. So let's say you build up a lot of equity in your practice or in your building, whether it's a building that owns a practice or whether it's an apartment complex or storage facility, whatever it is, you build up a lot of equity. That equity is sitting there with no use. It's called trapped equity. You got to put that equity to use, right? So that's what we're talking about is refinance. What Dr. Noah Lu just said is you go into a practice, you bought the building, and let's say for ease of calculations, you purchase a building for $1 million, okay? And the rents that you were collecting, let's say was $10,000 on that building from
Mm-hmm.
multiple. You may have three tenants or something, so $3,300 each. You get $10,000 a month. I mean, this don't do the calculations or cap rate and all that. I'm just making it easy. And what Dr. Noah Lu is saying is go in, do some modifications, and increase the rent. Let's say you can increase it by from three to very conservatively, just let's say $5,000. You did modifications, and the other tenant, the escalations. What is escalation is every year how much their rent is going to go up by. Usually it's 3%, 5%, could be 7%, depending on how hot the area is. Let's say after you moved, you acquired the building, you got in new tenants, and you're getting them at $5,000 a piece, and you build in an escalation of 4% rent increases every year. Now you got three tenants paying you $5,000, and that brings the total rent collected to $15,000 instead of $10,000. So $15,000 is your new rent before it was $10,000. Okay. Now the property before when you went to the bank was valued based on the $10,000 a month rent, and that was $1 million. Now you're going to go to the bank and say, "Hey, my rents are $15,000 now, and the property should be valued at 1.5 million bucks, or let's say 1.75, or something like that." And the bank is like, "Okay, let me take a look at the rent roll. Let me do all the math." And the bank's like, "You're right. The property is worth 1.75, and you can take 70% of that out, and
Mm-hmm.
sorry, the loan to value is going to be 70%. So now you're going to refinance the building at a new valuation of 1.75. Let's make it 2 million to be easy, right? 2 million instead of $1 million. So now the value of the building went up by $1 million. You purchased the building for $1 million. Now the value has gone up by $1 million. That means the bank's going to give you a bunch of money because the value has gone up, and now you keep that money. And there is no tax that needs to be paid on that. You can take that money and buy another property. Did I
100%.
explain that correctly, or
You
is there
nailed it, my man. You nailed
exactly?
it. And
Yeah.
that's the reason why we do this here, so that you can actually play around with this transaction. Now, keep in mind, once we take the rent out and we are paying towards the real estate rent, I mean, that is a tax deductible write off for the business, right? Any
Yeah.
income that's coming in to the real estate entity, now that is passive income. We can further write that off by doing something called a cost segregation on that real estate property because you own it. You need to get a company out there. They're going to come in. They're going to do some analysis. They're going to see, like, what's going to depreciate within the next, 27 and a half years. And then from there, they will make sure like what we can accelerate in terms of depreciation, and then give a negative K1 where we can actually offset some of the rent that's coming in. So that's another play that you can do in terms of saving on taxes. Without getting too much further into the weeds, what I would like to say is that once, if you have it structured right in two separate entities, the whole real estate and dental practice is our playground at that time.
Yeah.
But the banks will never let you do that is because they want to collateralize every single thing that you own. I mean, like pretty much all the assets that you have, they would want to own it or make sure that you are guaranteeing it with something else. They would always want to crisscross it and tie it against each other.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that was like one of those things where we can really get deep into it. But of course, with our Facebook Live, we like to keep it nice, short, easy, and absorbable at the same time. So if you guys are in this situation and have any questions, hit us up. Tom and I, we are always available to help.
Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, especially about what we talked about, refining a building, and you may be sitting on some equity. And I've been always been taught before, and we've all been, that as much as you can pay off the building so you can
Right.
own the building outright, right? Then later on, I realized that that is not how the wealthy people play the game. They refi, take the cash out, and they go and acquire another building, enjoy the cash flow, build up the value of the building, refi it again, go and buy another building.
100%.
So at the end of your career, you will be sitting on 4 or 5 buildings, basically.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Like I always say, like, what would you rather do? Pay yourself a higher rent and then write it off as a passive income coming into that entity? And then,
Hmm.
of course, or just pay, at whatever rate we pay at, which is 39.5% right now. So,
Yeah,
21 versus 39.5 on that, rent rate, whatever it is, like 7, 8 grand that we pay every month on a yearly basis, that adds up. So just something to keep in mind. Some of these gameplays that you can actually play with your own property if you have one, if you're not structured this way. But if you are structured this way and you are doing it, kudos to you.
good, awesome. All right, I think that's some amazing information. Again, if you have any questions, Dr. Noah Liu is an expert in this. He's done several of these transactions. You got to hit him up
Hmm.
and or send him a DM or put it in the comments. Ask him any questions about this. And any other questions, guys, related to refinance, related to owning property, related to dental practices, feel free to put it in the comments so that everybody can benefit. And one of us will answer, or some of the experts in this group will answer. And again, once again, thank you for joining us, and we will see